Right. Welcome, everyone. Nikita, welcome to our Fireside chat. Excited to do this with you.
Glad to be here.
Yeah, so we're talking about modern B2B commerce today. I know it's an exciting topic and something we both have a lot of experience with. And, want to really talk to our audience about, a couple of things today. First off, what is modern B2B commerce and what are manufacturers and distributors looking for today? And then obviously you're joining us from Shopify, so we want to hear your perspective on, how is Shopify different? What are you guys bringing that's new to the equation for manufacturers and distributors? I know we'll also dive a little bit into Portal and, talk a little more about how Portal is, built on Shopify and all how that's accelerating manufacturer and distributors to, really accelerate their journeys with Shopify. And excited to have this conversation. But before we do that, Nikita, I want to give you the opportunity to introduce yourself and share a little more about you and kind of your journey.
Thanks, Evan. I really appreciate it. And thank you for having me. You know, Myself, I'm a partner solutions engineer at Shopify, and so my goal is really to help with everything that is technical enablement and pre-sale solutioning with our partners, such as yourself, so our agency partners. Um, Before joining Shopify, I was agency side, so I have the general gist of what are the problems that agencies such as your own are trying to solve. But today, what I really want to I'm quite excited to focus on is the work that both Shopify and our partners, especially Zaelab, is doing around manufacturers and distributors.
So Nikita, you and I have talked a lot about, B2B buyers really needing a new playbook today. And I wanted to just start with, what are you hearing from buyers that makes you believe that B2B companies, they need a new playbook? What are they telling you?
Yeah, I think, look, we're in this digital age and we're seeing a lot of sort of changing of the guard within the larger enterprises that are focused on B2B. Whether it be the next generation taking over, whether it be the older generation selling and retiring and the younger generation coming in. And you're just seeing across the board a willingness to have digitally native experiences um, for for even those traditional manufacturing distribution type of businesses where the buyers want to be able to show up online and make their purchases. And ultimately that requires a paradigm shift, not only technologically, but also we have the whole aspect of having to deal with the cultural changes that come with having a more sort of digitally native purchasing experience.
That makes total sense. And, Nikita, you talked a little bit about, some of that demographic shift that's happening. And, obviously there's a lot of changes and expectations around digital experience are clearly increasing. But, I think you probably see the same thing that I do, which is despite that, manufacturers and distributors, they often struggle with that transformation. And I'd love to hear from you, like, what do you think the reasons are that, they struggle to, either believe or to execute on the transformation required to meet these new demands?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there, where the struggles are there, and the main issue is really culture. You often through this digital transformation, you have a cultural transformation that has to happen in parallel. It means that, the sales reps that are used to, having to place the orders on behalf of their customers, maybe they need to let go of that and do the things that they actually enjoy doing. Because let's be honest, a sales rep doesn't necessarily enjoy the admin and the manual toil of actually entering the orders manually. What they enjoy is actually going and selling those physical interactions. And so in this age of, being digitally native, AI taking over quite a bit, um, we need to sort of focus on the human aspect, the human interaction, and what is the human capital within a business, and trying to make sure that we align the digital transformation with that cultural transformation.
Love that. So tell us a little more about, what is Shopify's philosophy when it comes to this? How is, Shopify enabling this modernization?
Yeah, so I think that the main thing that we need to remember is that from a Shopify perspective, what we introduced about 2 years ago now, time flies, is are the core B2B primitives from a data perspective. So what we're talking about here is price lists or catalogs, depending on the jargon that you're used to, the concept of companies, company locations, and generally just more refined permissions in order to enable things like having sales staff within the digital environment. And so once we've brought those in, and also all of the sort of features that are needed from a checkout perspective to start that B2B journey, we were then able to present this to our partners who are then able to build upon that and expand that out to all of the more refined use cases. So, and we're going to touch upon that and that's Portal. So Portal on your end, you were able to build upon these data primitives that are B2B focused and build out an experience that is specifically catered to manufacturers and distributors, and be able to actually service them efficiently. And at the end of the day, what that combination looks like at a high level is Shopify uh, operates per the ethos that we've always operated by, where we bring 80% of the functionality, but we make sure that we expose enough APIs in this case to enable partners such as Zaelab to build out that last 20% and be able to go to market with with 100% solution for their customers.
Makes total sense. Nikita, are there themes that you see in companies that when they're trying to modernize, do they make a common set of mistakes that you see? What would be your advice for B2B companies that are looking to undergo this modernization?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and this doesn't necessarily just apply to sort of B2B specific businesses. I think this applies to any business that is going through a digital transformation. When you're going through this process, you you sometimes fall into the trap of saying, I need one-to-one functionality from my legacy platform to my new platform, in this case, Shopify. I think it's important to understand why were you having that process in place on your legacy platform, and then revisit, is that truly the best way to be operating? If so, then yes, let's go and achieve that one-to-one functionality. But if the answer is you were just limited by the platform that you were working with, then let's revisit that process and try to build a better one on the new platform. So I think
Yeah,
that's an important piece there.
I love that, Nikita. In fact, I watched a podcast this morning with Toby from Shopify and a new board member about, the board member was talking about first principles and really starting from the point of, let's not focus on how we've done it, but what do we need today to win and be successful? And so I think that's great advice.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that was with Joe Natale, our new board member, right?
Yes,
Yeah, that was a fantastic chat they had.
it's great.
So we've already just talked about a bit of the sort of cultural shift but more importantly, what I want to dive into is more of the tech shift. So the pacing framework, PACING, is a framework that is unique to Zaelab's modern selling approach. So what I'd love for you to do, Evan, is maybe explain that to us.
Yeah, happy to. A couple of years back, what we started to find was that, organizations were struggling to figure out, what are the capabilities that we need? And so we created a tool that we call the periodic table of B2B commerce. And, there's 152 elements that we think are important for B2B companies. But what we consistently found in our research and working with clients was that there were six that really mattered. And we created the pacing framework, which are six of the key elements. And it's really, what we found is that companies that focus on these six elements begin to see outsized results and benefits of deploying B2B commerce. And it's personalization, automation, collaboration, integration, nimble, and guided selling. And, I won't go through each of these, but What we found is that, personalization and really in a B2B experience is that, you're not just selling to a one-to-one customer, right? And particularly they're not coming to you because, it's an impulse purchase. And so, oftentimes in B2B, we see that there's, purchasing agents or engineers and a variety of different personas. So really thinking about, how do we build an experience that helps them get their jobs done in a business setting is critical. Automation, we're starting to see that, how do we leverage automation to make your customers' lives easier? Collaboration, right? This is in our world in B2B experience. Uh, these aren't just, hey, I'm going to add something to my shopping cart, I'm going to click buy now, and I'm going to be done, right? There's sales engineers involved and other types of people that you need to engage with. And so, how do we create digital experiences that are collaborative and enable us, to do work together? Integration, people need to trust the data. They need to know if you give me a price or if you give me my inventory, that I can trust that, and it's real time, and it's going to deliver when it says it's going to deliver. The flexibility and nimbleness is so important. Being able to adapt, try, test, learn based upon real-time customer feedback, and then guided selling, which is about, I always give a good example of, a client, like Caterpillar that is selling, oil filters as an example. You search oil filters, you come back with, 5,000 different types of oil filters, but that's not what I want. I want the oil filter that fits the piece of machinery that I bought from you 3 months ago. So guide me to that. Help me understand what I need to buy. And so the pacing framework is really a framework that helps, focus B2B organization on what really matters and what drives the needle.
Absolutely. That sounds super exciting. I want to touch upon one element of the pacing framework, and that's nimble. That's not necessarily something that we associate with the B2B enterprise context. So I'd love to maybe dive in a bit more and double click into that and see what does that look like in this context.
Great question. So, we've been in this technology ecosystem for a long time, Nikita, and we've seen that, there's lots of legacy technology that these organizations have inherited. Um, and some of that technology is not what I would call fast or really built for, the needs of customers or organizations today. And this is precisely why we are excited to partner with Shopify. What we saw with Shopify was they fundamentally reinvented commerce, and they really figured out that, technology shouldn't be a barrier, but should be an enabler. And so what this looks like for us is that, customers want to focus on what is different and unique about them. They don't want to focus on the operations. They don't want to focus on maintenance. They don't want to focus on upgrades. And so why we're excited about the partnership with Shopify is that, ever since, Shopify has really kind of accelerated their B2B platform, it's brought the same approach and lets customers focus on what really matters and enables that nimbleness. And so for our customers, what it means is that, again, they're not focused on operational maintenance support. They're focused on how do we build the capabilities that are really going to move the needle for our customers.
Nice. You already started tooting Shopify's horn, but before we dive into that, what I want to sort of, what I want to for you to help clarify for me is, where do you see traditional e-commerce platforms actually failing or falling short rather for the B2B use cases that you're coming across?
A lot of it's flexibility, right? As we think about B2B organizations, buying processes are different. Um, B2B organizations, again, when we think about what the needs are, very rarely, is it, hey, I just want to come to my website. Search is not always the same, right? Again, go back to the example I gave on, the oil filters. I'm not shopping impulsively. I'm shopping based on a need, right? I have a piece of machinery that's down, or I need a specific solution to my problem. I need to know when I could get something to my project site. And so when we think about B2B commerce experience, we have to really think about, the unique needs of B2B organizations and what that buying process ultimately looks like. And a lot of the commerce platforms out there are just not flexible, and they, struggle when we want to build experiences that are really purpose built and tailored to the customer's buying process. And again, Shopify through its APIs and B2B primitives and solutions like Portal have really enabled us to do that and adapt the platform by bringing the 80% of the core commerce capabilities and then letting us focus on that 20% that is differentiated or unique to that customer's buying process.
It's, Um, you're out in the field. You're selling Shopify, the platform. You're implementing Shopify, the platform. What I want to hear from you is actually what are you hearing from specifically manufacturers and distributors around why is it that they're actually going with Shopify in the end? Um, and like what resonates about Shopify for them?
Well, I think all the benefits, that we've talked about, right? Everybody's heard stories of, hey, your grandma can set up a shopping e-commerce website, overnight. And I think that's really true. And what we're hearing from, B2B manufacturers is they're desperate. They're craving that flexibility and that speed and that innovation. And look, we have spent a lot of time with enterprises. Oftentimes when we come in, they do think of Shopify as, something that's great for retailers, but they don't yet believe or they don't yet know that Shopify actually has, robust capabilities to service enterprise B2B clients. And through some of what we've done with, Shopify and Portal, it's really enabled us to go have a more fully formed conversation with enterprises about, how do we meet their complex needs through this solution. And so, again, that's what's really made us excited is that, again, Shopify gives us the speed, the platform, the capabilities, and then we've supplemented that through Portal to really say, hey, here's the other 20%, 30% of what you need. And, given our experience in the B2B space, we've built a really purposeful focused experience that is truly well aligned to the needs of manufacturers, but leverages all the benefits of Shopify.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the other thing that sort of highlight here is at the end of the day, like a lot of the legacy platforms that we're seeing out there are have versions. They require updates that are often very expensive. And I don't want to dive too deep into this, but ultimately it's about talking about how Shopify ultimately is versionless. We will continuously push out updates. We have our editions twice a year where over 150 updates are published, and for you to get access to those updates, you don't have to go and update your version of Shopify and go and update all of your integrations. Ultimately, as long as everything is built in a scalable and performant way, then you are not in a situation where you have to keep updating everything that you have already built out and more importantly your commerce platform itself. But anyways, I don't want to dive too deep into that. But speaking of like comparing tech stacks, comparing platforms, um, again, you're out in the field when you talk to the B2B leaders. Um, what do you tell them to um how do you advise them on evaluating whether their tech stack is actually helping them or hurting them?
Well, look, I think one way we do that is, we ask them where their time and energy is going. And, oftentimes what we hear is that their time and energy is being spent on things that are not differentiating the business. And so that's, usually a good marker for us to understand if there's a technology problem. But what I think is important here, Nikita, and it kind of gets to, what's different about Shopify. I think we've seen this market evolve, over the last 15 years. And, for a very long time, as you said, customers were stuck in this kind of vicious, endless upgrade cycle and customization cycle. And I think what's impressed me most about Shopify is that, what makes Shopify different, right? First off, what we've seen with other kind of organizations is that, it really comes back to the kind of core foundational architecture that the platform's built on. And one of the things I've learned and appreciated about Shopify is, this vision to really harness and stay and keep that core platform pure and cloud native and really it as an outsider looking in, it seems that like that's a non-negotiable for Shopify, right? That we're going to keep that platform, clean and core. And, I think other organizations and commerce platforms in this space, frankly, just didn't do that. And, over time, that kind of technology dead and it eroded them and, it translated to their customers' problems, right? And so I think that's really important, and I think that's really differentiated. And it's put other commerce technologies in catch-up mode, and frankly, it's really hard to catch up with Shopify. Um, and then the second thing is just mindset. Again, I think with that kind of principled approach around, keeping the core clean, it's also the mindset, right? Shopify's got this, I was pretty impressed when we started working with Shopify, but the product centricity of the organization, and the fact that, everyone I talk to at Shopify is capable of running a demo. But just that product centricity and that product focus, many other commerce technologies in that we've seen evolve, they didn't have that, right? And again, it was a sales or marketing or other types of focus that, hey, we're effective. But again, I think, it feels to me like Shopify's really bet the long game that, hey, if we keep the focus on the product and the customer, and if we keep that core architecture clean, right, and we really buy into the platform vision that the benefits are going to be really impactful to the customers. And I think it's, from what I've seen, it's working quite effectively.
I think a good testament to that sort of product centricity is the the core free rules that we have internally, where it's number one, we build an incredible product. Number two, we find a way to make sure that we make money with that incredible product. But ultimately, number three is never in verse one and two. And so at the end of the day, product over everything else is the core approach. Absolutely.
Seems to be working.
Somehow. All right, we've talked a bit around, why does B2B need a better playbook? We've talked about the tech shift. Let's dive into um, some of the unique uh, sort of functionality that Zaelab brings to the table in the form of Portal and acceleration of Portal. So, from a technical perspective, Evan, how does Portal build on Shopify's native B2B capabilities?
Great question. So what we saw as we, entered the Shopify ecosystem a couple of years back, we were quite impressed at the level of innovation that Shopify had done around B2B, and namely the B2B primitives and the underlying data models and capabilities. And, it occurred to us, kind of having been in the space, that not a lot of people knew this, that, this was a bit of a secret that, Shopify had, really kind of innovated around B2B. And again, it had all the foundational pieces, but it didn't, really come across as, we would look at demos and solutions. And so, over the years, we had built out a solution called Portal, which, for us was, really this manifestation of having worked with B2B organizations over the last, 15 years. We wanted to really invent and create a B2B experience that was truly best in class, that, took what we knew worked really well for B2B manufacturers and distributors and codified it into, a unified experience that again, modernized the B2B experience, but also helped customers more quickly adopt and implement capabilities that mattered most, for B2B. And so what we did was, after we spent some time with the platform and we recognized that, there's a lot of goodness here, we took Portal and we integrated it with Shopify's B2B primitives. And the collective value we felt was really strong. So again, we knew Shopify had the right kind of bones and underlying capabilities, but just that experience didn't come across and necessarily communicate as effectively as we thought it could to, B2B manufacturers, that, hey, Shopify can, again, not only solve your direct to consumer needs, but it can also give you an enterprise class B2B experience. And so, we took Portal, we found pretty quickly we were able to integrate it into the B2B primitives. And the result is that, again, what we now have is we've taken Shopify, combined that with Portal, and the result is that we have a really exceptional experience that addresses, some gaps that we didn't find in the core platform. Things like, complex product configuration or certain integrations to CRM or ERP systems, things like workflows, right, for, new dealers or, the ability to do quoting. And so what we did was we kind of looked at Shopify and we said, hey, what else can we build that our customers need that, Shopify may not be able to do themselves or just, has other priorities in their roadmap. And we really, aim to fill that gap and really kind of overall is the result is, again, a more robust B2B solution that harnesses what Shopify's platform can already do.
Yeah, absolutely. Quick follow-up question for that is just for those in the audience that don't aren't necessarily familiar with Portal, what would you say like if you were to give like the top three standout features of Portal, what would they be?
Good question. So, we've really taken a lot of time to invest in a couple of areas with Portal, right? So one of those areas is, you know, typically a shopping cart is doesn't meet the full needs of, a B2B customer. Oftentimes in B2B settings, what we see is, hey, users are managing many carts or quotes, at a single time. And so we spent a lot of time really thinking through that experience, and we've created the ability to manage, many, many carts at a time and make it easier for a B2B buyer to, again, just manage those at a single time and quite easily. And so that's a big area. The second is, really complex account management. In a B2B setting, what we've found is that, again, you're going to have many different types of users that have different needs, and they want the ability to restrict or enable different parts of the site and experiences. Maybe you want people to see invoices, you don't want people to see invoices. And, so we've built the kind of a more robust roles and permissions framework to enable that. And then finally, workflows, right? So we've leveraged, the ability in our world in B2B, we see that, many times customers, want to have different thresholds or approvals for customers. And we've built the ability to have different workflows that enable those types of actions and permissions. And so, again, those are some of the three capabilities that we see requested most from our clients.
Absolutely. And one additional follow-up, just to sort of toot your horn a bit more. This is all possible within the native Shopify experience, as in without having to leave your Shopify store. Is that right?
That's correct. So there's a couple of different modes of integration, and again, it depends on the specific customer's needs. But there's that option for sure. So Nikita, if somebody's watching this and they're stuck, what would you recommend as their first step?
I feel like I would not be doing my job right if I didn't say, go ahead and immediately reach out to Zaelab and the Shopify team, and they'll help you get unstuck. But if you're looking to do something even before that, then it is going back to what I think we started by talking about at the very beginning, and it's kind of going back to um, uh, first principles thinking, and it's just understanding what is it that you need. Is the way that you've been doing things the right way necessarily? Are you just doing it because you don't have a choice? If you had another way to do it, would you do it differently? And then ultimately, and hopefully, the answers will guide you to being like, yes, I think I really need to talk to Zaylab and Shopify.
Love that.
Once they've reached out to you and once they've started working with Shopify and Zaylab, they've started using Portal, they've they've launched, they're selling on Shopify, they're all super excited. What types of results can the teams expect to see within the first 90 days?
Yeah, so we encourage our customers to really focus on an MVP approach, right? You know, what's the minimum viable product that they can deliver quickly? Because at the end of the day, getting to market and getting something out there is the most important thing. And it's hard to do. And so, we very much encourage our customers to think in increments of 90 days, which is, hey, what can we accomplish that's going to meet a real need that's viable and get them to market as quickly as possible. And from there, it's iteration, right? If we can get feedback from customers, if we can help them, um, really start to open those lines of communications with their customers, then we could figure out what's real and what they need to build next to meet that demand. And so, again, for our customers, we're really pushing them and really trying to think about, 90-day increments to get something to market. There's also, I'm not sure if you've seen this, but we've seen a lot of, hesitation of moving off legacy technology. Like it's safety blanket or comfort blanket for them. What would you say to leaders that are hesitant to do that?
Yeah. But before I dig into like what are the arguments to sort of move off of legacy stacks, I think there's something somebody posted this on LinkedIn recently, and it's not so much about sort of moving on from your legacy stack that's difficult, but it's moving on from nostalgia. It's something that it's something that you're comfortable with, and change is scary. Like let's not hide it. It can be scary, it can be challenging, and involves a lot of change management. So beyond that, what are the arguments that you need to look at in order to actually that make the plunge and go in and actually move off your legacy stack? Well, it'll really depend on which leadership role are you in. If you're a CTO, then you probably already know that working with Shopify from a technical perspective is a lot easier. So you need to then convince your CFO to sign off on it or your CEO to sign off on it. Well, what's the argument there? Well, maybe it's looking at the TCO, um, the total cost of ownership, understanding that with Shopify, your TCO is very likely to be lower. Why is that? Well, it's because you don't have as much of the keeping the lights um, uh, budget that is required, keeping the lights on budget that is required. So what does that actually mean? It just means that instead of having to spend on OpEx to make sure that everything is running and updating your version every few months, well, you're able to shift that budget over to focus on innovation, which will ultimately make your CFO happy because it's CapEx. It'll also make your CMO and your CEO happy because you're then able to deliver more exciting experiences for your customers. And then if you're the CEO, then you combine those two previous arguments to go and convince your technical teams and your financial teams, and you're off to the races. But ultimately, it'll really depend on which leadership position are you in. But it's around looking at how easy is it to work with Shopify, and what is the actual cost of owning your platform.
It's great.
So. Um, we've been having a good time here. Evan, if you were to summarize, what makes the Shopify plus Zaelab partnership unique?
Great question. I think what makes us unique, Nikita, is that, we're aligned, right? And we have unique value propositions on both sides of the fence that collectively come together and create value, right? Shopify's building the best commerce platform in the world, and Zaylab's focused on, enabling customers to modernize B2B commerce experiences. And, there's a lot to do when it comes to building a commerce platform, and there's a lot to do when it comes to building, best-in-class B2B commerce experiences. But when you combine those together, it creates tangible customer value, right? And again, in my experience, again, building a product is very different than, focusing on a single kind of, niche and marketplace that has distinct problems. And so we collectively put that together, and we both have, real value to create and purpose to create. And I think, in this case, 1 + 1 = 10. But that's really what creates it. We're aligned. We're both looking and ambitious about, dominating the market. very much respect the philosophy around, Shopify and how they've built the platform. And I think you guys, also are excited about some of the innovation that we're doing, right? That's above and beyond Shopify, but also leveraging the platform. And so again, I think those things collectively together is what makes this a unique and valuable partnership for us and for our clients.
Absolutely. Now that the audience is absolutely convinced to work with Shopify and Zaelab to leverage Portal for their business, where can people go to learn more or start the conversation?
Yeah, they can go to zaylab.com, shopify.com, and I know we are talking all the time, so feel free to reach out to us. You can send an email to hello@zaylab.com. LinkedIn, any medium, I think we aim to be findable. Nikita, thank you for your time today. I think it was awesome to hear from you and learn more about, what Shopify is doing in this space and the partnership. And we appreciate that partnership and we're excited to keep innovating together.
We're also very excited for the partnership. We're excited to see which merchants are going to be leveraging Portal, and just seeing what are you going to what else are you going to build in terms of experiences that involve Portal and Zaylab and Shopify. So yeah, Evan, I really appreciate you taking the time and having me out here. And somehow, even with some coffee, this white shirt did not get stained, so it's a win.
Oh, wonderful. It's a win. Thanks, Nikita.
Thanks.